everybody. We're on the Klolei Adrocha, page 35. The Kitzur, the second paragraph. Let's read the Kitzur together. B'nei Yodam, human beings, people, Hem Bale, Milas, V'chazronis, have virtues and deficiencies. B'teldusam, from birth, or Gilusam, from habit. B'chaylas, Yaakov, whoever has their, please mute yourself, everyone. B'chaylas ha'oived lahafich es hachasorin l'mayla. It is possible for the oved. So oved now becomes a noun, the worker, the servant. In Chabad, it's a very, very large buzzword. An oved. Are you an oved? Are you an oved? He's an oved, meaning he works on himself. In yeshiva, it means he davens with lots of kavanah for a long time, doesn't jump and down to breakfast or to lunch, but's in the middle of davening. That was Shabbos afternoon, spends 2-3 hours davening. That's the connotation of oved in Chabad, okay? The Rebbe here, in our essay, the Rebbe here uses it as someone who works on himself, lahafich es hachisoron l'mayla, to transform the deficiency and negativity to a virtue. Okay, so that's the context of oved here. So oved is a general word, depending in which surroundings and in which arena does it have its meaning. So it could be, in the Sephardic world, oved has a different meaning, and in the Litvish world, a third meaning. But it's a general word that reflects avoda, work. Okay, hey, Tanai Sheni. Now I'm getting to the second prerequisite, the condition, to be a proper mechanech and madrich. Hachsharas ha-mechanech ha-madrich. The preparation. It doesn't seem like it's very different. What does that mean? Let's see what he means. Ha-mechanech ha-madrich, the educator and the guide, tzorech hachshara miyuchedes, needs a specific preparation, liyisroyu lechanech ulahadrich, to be suitable, to be a machanech, and to be a madrich. V'asher chinuche v'hadrich osei, so that his chinuch, his education, and his guidance, yoviu to'eles nirtza, will bring a desirable result. Loi kol habo litel shein mechanech u'madrich yochel lokachas olav achrayas gedoyle kezu. Not any Tom, Dick, and Harry, to use the modern, the slang or whatever English slogan, idiom. Not every person who wants to take the name litol shein of being called mechanech or madrich. We spoke about this yesterday. Can take upon himself this great responsibility. Why? Someone who is not fit for this position. Not only, and if he does take the position, Yaakov, although he's not suitable for the position, not only does he not correct the situation, he doesn't bring tikkun, Elohedes more so, who mekalkel, he ruins the situation. V'hakoyred tolui al tolui b'tzavosei. In English it means, he bears responsibility, but it means it's like the noose is around his neck. Moshe, you hear that?
Yeah.
You need a job? Become a Rebbe. And meanwhile the kids suffer because you have no patience and you are abusive or whatever else. The noose is around your neck, my friend. What you're doing is terrible, and you don't belong there. Very important. Don't sell yourself for money. I know you need parnasa. We need to get you parnasa. But make sure you're in the right position. Who's a good CEO? Someone who knows how to delegate responsibility. There's a mishaleach and a shliach. In halachic terms, the shliach represents the mishaleach, you understand, right? So, in the world of shlichus and Chabad, I always talk about this idea. The mishaleach was given power as the Mishaleach, the head, in Chabad they call it the head shliach of a state, right? To find the appropriate job for the shliach, not to fire him, not to cut his legs off, not to leave him without parnosa. He's not good for this position, get him another position. I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't know how it came. The idea of commitment and responsibility and care. In other words, if you care about someone, you're going to help them. If not here, there. And this is missing today, you should know. At least, I don't know. It's missing. It's like we're technical. We're going to get you a position. And if it doesn't work out, you're out on the street. No. That's not real Avas Yisrael. That's not real Rachmanis. That's technicality of, you need a rabbi, you need a Rebbe, and you need a worksman. You find them a position, and when you don't need him anymore, go fly a kite. If you take a look, and it's not just in Chabad, you take a look in organizations, who are those that are, say most successful? Those leaders and CEOs who are really concerned about their employees and their staff, that they keep them on staff forever. Now you'll say, yeah, now of course, if there's no funds anymore, it's a problem. And if we belly up and it's bankrupt and we're out, I'm not talking about those situations. But this idea, he's not good here. So I'm coming to this idea because he says here, not every person is fit to be a machanech. Fine. But he's fit to do something else. Yes, Yaakov.
I used to teach Limudei Chol some years ago. In one yeshiva, I was quite not successful. In another yeshiva, I was much more successful. And in one yeshiva, they got the better of my temper. And it lives with me out of Yom Hazeh that I didn't handle myself right. And in another place, it went much better. So it had to do with the oilim, and it had to do with the kids, and what I was able to do with it, and all that. One point you do about the turnover is very important, and it's unfortunate culture of turnover that they don't really invest in the teachers to want to keep them on. Some, they have to be really, really talented and really grab the kids, and they'll offer you a contract for life. I know one such person that he was very captivating like that, but you have to have that kind of personality to make Limudei Chol run like that. As a Rebbe, you have it's a much different surah in the morning. It's a much different surah that goes in a much different way. In the afternoon, you have to really invest yourself.
Right.
And the school has to know, the boys have to know that the school is invested in you, and that it's
right.
And you can get that support. It all works out with how the works things through.
Right. In the Chabad model of shlichus, the way I grew up, and in my time, what I said earlier was the idea that when you were hired by a head shliach, it was for life. It's not, in other words, you hired someone. You took someone to become your partner as part of you. So if you cut him off, you're cutting yourself off, and you don't want to cut yourself off, right? So you don't cut him off. The story I've told you, worth mentioning briefly, Rebbe Shlomo Schwartz, he told me over Shalom, I asked him what was going on in Chabad House in 1970, 71, 72, those years. He said, look, let me tell you how we lived together. We had a junker car in the garage of UCLA at the Chabad House, right? The first Chabad House on campus with a UCLA. And he said, it was I, Rabbi Kudin, and Rabbi Levitansky over Sholem. Well, we need 3 cars, but we only have 1. That's right, because they couldn't afford. They only had 1. I said, how did you manage? You hear what he told me, Avi? He said, listen, the cars never left the ignition. When Schwartz needed it, he turned the ignition. Kudin needed it, he turned the ignition. And Levitansky needed it, he turned the ignition. In other words, it wasn't their individual car. It was Chabad's car, community. That's the attitude. So anyway, let's continue. Everyone understands. Let's continue. Second paragraph, 35. The first preparation of the Mechanech for the great activity and responsibility of HaChinuch and holiness, in educating and guiding, is self-examination. The educator and the guide must examine himself. More so, more than an ordinary person. If you're an educator, you're a guide, self-examination for you is more important. As we said earlier in chapter 3, for this is his entire moral and spiritual existence depends on self-examination. In addition to the incisive self-discipline, that the educator and the guide that has to examine himself. When instructing his education and his guidance and using a certain signon. You know what signon means? Style of language. You know, we talk about it, you could say the same thing, but with different words. Sometimes the usage of the signon Hillel makes all the difference of the all the difference in the world, right? You aren't bad, you did something not appropriate. The activity is wrong, not you, etc. Those ideas. That we call the signon. So the educator and guide must examine himself. What are the manners, the styles, the formats that he's using for education guidance? Here it is. You must have the ultimate of patience. Right there, many of us are disqualified. My wife asked me, she's having a meeting with a principal. I said, what do you think my strengths are in education? I said, number one, your patience. Anyone that has patience in a classroom or in a educational system, to me, patience. You know? So that's what the Rebbe says here. She betachlos ha patience. Moshe, you have to have the ultimate of mesinut, of patience. V'hanimus. And deference, limus. V'yishtadel limtzoye b'skamim, and the educator should find sayings, pitgamim, matimim, that are appropriate lahahiroi sahem, to share the instruction that he desires sharing. V'yabiyim, from the word yabiyim, he should express them. Bibituyim, with expressions yafim, beautiful ones. Leman, so that they will be engraved in the heart of the educated and the guided. And they will stand before his eyes, even after he leaves his educator and his guide. You know, like, Hillel said yesterday, he shared with us, I remember what we learned in that mimer about Am Ha'aretz. Right? A short thing, and it's not even a chiddush of the Rebbe. The Rebbe just quoted it. It's brought in Rashi. But it just hits you the right way. Those buzzwords and those lines, can make such a difference to people, and you walk away with it, and that's what you live with. That's what the Rebbe talks about in this paragraph here, how important it is. So the educator has to self-examine himself. What expressions am I going to use? Really, when you give a shiur, when you take the time to prepare. And I remember in Los Angeles when I gave, these shiurim of self-improvement, I spent a lot of time. The content I knew, but what I worked on was how am I going to express what I want to get across in a short way, right to the point. What's the expression? Teka, sheka elateka. The plug into the socket. Right on, right? Bullseye, right? You know? Let's go next paragraph. The fruit of education and guidance, lo yitzmach, won't grow, won't blossom, bein laila, overnight. The chol davar, next page, 37. The chol davar vinyan bechinuch v'adrocha, and every matter of education and guidance, leimi boy asher laket teva. Needless to say, if you have to uproot teva or regilus, a nature or a habit that's no good, that's bad, of the educated and the guided, it takes a lot of work, in a proper time. That's surely the case. Even if you want to now implant a new good nature and behavior and character, whether you want it to become part of the person's nature or you want it to become part of lahargiloi, his habit, takes a lot of work, was man ruben a lot of time. In addition to the fact that the educated and the guided that he himself has to work at it. In other words, even if you give the best product to the student, if he doesn't work on it, nothing's going to be, right? But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about you, the educator, how much you have to invest and know that this is important and it takes work and effort on your part. Next paragraph. The educator and the guide. He must know not only are the appropriate phrases important for instruction, relevant to education and guidance, you know, you could say the same thing, but if you say it has one expression. If you say it softly and kindly and a smile, it has a whole other different meaning. So that's what he says, Elegam oifen, Hillel. You're following these, every word here has a kafetch, has a nuance. Elegam oifen, also the manner in which bitu hapsgamim, he expresses the phrases, im benimus umasinos, if with Yonason, nimus, with like a respect and etiquette, umesinut, and patience, or with excitement and embarrassment, meaning, you know, you could see that he's all over the place. This too is relevant to the foundation, the beneficial foundations of Chinuch V'Adrocha. And he goes further. Even general display of agitation and ridicule. Okay? So here, what are we identifying, Moshe? We're identifying calmness and patience versus agitation and ridicule. The same phrase, the same idea, but one way it's delivered with calmness and patience, and the other way, Yaakov, it's delivered with what? With agitation. You saw that he didn't have a good night's sleep. We had a fight with his wife last night. People come into shul in the morning, the first minyan, and depending on how they act and what they do, right away you say, so you and your wife were at each other last night. You know. Let's go further. When we talk about when the Mechanech is discussing an issue of deficiencies that are very damaging to man's character, you hear that? He calls this feature in the student, right? He uses embarrassing zilzul terms for it. Stupid, foolish, whatever Maybe foolish is not as bad, but there's, right? So look what the Rebbe says in between the lines in the third paragraph of 37. Asher be'emes masimim heim. Really, he didn't say anything bad, Yaakov. Why? Because matimim, what you did is foolish. What you did is stupid. But that's not the way you communicate the message to the student. I think back, they're in Gan Eden. I had certain Rebbes, they meant well, they had no patience, and they would call students stupid. Horse. I had a teacher call me horse. 5th grade. Big rabbi. And I have only love for him. But when I reflect back, and I don't like going there because it's very uncomfortable. You call the student horse? It's like, why? Because I didn't get it. In his mind, my thick head didn't get it. So he calls me in Yiddish, Pferd, horse. And he didn't really belong in a classroom. Tremendous Talmud Chacham, excellent. But, you can't be a teacher today. He would be, probably locked up or fired and everything else. The point being, the choice of words in communicating the same message and the same idea requires nimus and mesivus. And this is a prerequisite for an educator. Let's continue. When the educator uses this type of language, it makes a negative impression to the educated and guided by hearing ridicule and embarrassing and such type of language. Afilu amitim. Avi, look at those words. Afilu amitim. Even if you do have a thick skull, even if you are behaving a certain way. In other words,
might have gone to hell in the way he wants to go there.
Yeah. Another expression they used to use in yeshiva, is para adam. You heard the expression para adam means a wild donkey, a wild animal. You're a para adam. Now, believe me, I had, and I'm sure you guys we had some wild guys. We had wild animals, and they deserved the pets they got. But that's not education. That leave up to the parents, and even there, it needs to be really looked at carefully. Is this the way to educate, or is just expressing your anger? Excuse me, Bashi. Weiter. Mipnei mechanchoi madrichoi u'mismait erkoi shel ha'bechana v'hamadrich. Mipi, sorry. If these words come out from the mouth of the educator and the mouth of the guide, u'mismait erkoi shel ha'bechanach v'hamadrich, it causes a diminishing of evaluation and appreciation that the student has towards the educator and guide, v'einam mechuna v'hamudrich. Rabbi Madrichim, many of the educators and the guides, they make a mistake in this aspect. They think when they'll become agitated, with a thundery, loud voice, a stormy voice of agitation, they will accomplish their goal. That's what the Rebbe says. 1898, Rabim Mahamachanchim. Nothing has changed, guys. Umehem misnaplim ala machunach. Misnaplim comes from the word fall. They fall upon. In other words, they attack the educated and the mudrach and the guided, the student, bedivri reidus, with words of anger. Bedvorim koshim, kegidim, with words that are as sharp as like thorns, angry language, berating them. They berate them and they embarrass them. Says the Rebbe, even if temporarily the educated, the guided gets inspired somehow from the agitation and the words of embarrassment and anger and all that. From the stormy fire. But the imre fi, the words of the mouth, meaning the inside of the educated and the guided, and the heart, biskavitz, shrivels up, mitzar, from pain. Right? Many students never share what they experienced as children, as teenagers, in these matters. I'm not talking about now abuse and all that. I'm talking about, well, this might be considered abuse today. But they have this inside them, and it's very deep. To themselves, they'll cry bitterly that their educator spoke to them in such a way that made them feel insignificant, made them feel worthless and useless. Says the Rebbe, this type of guidance and education, it won't bring any benefit, and it will vanish like a fleeting dream. It's interesting because I don't want to say, names, chas v'sholom, but we do know. Oh, let's talk about a system of learning. Yaakov later can follow up on this. I was sitting in shul here, and there was someone whose I think father was in Mir in Europe, and we had a discussion, and he told me that the system in some of the literacy yeshivas, I think Mir was one of the yeshivas, was that when someone says a pilpul, an essay, a dissertation, and explains it, the ones listening not only have a right, but kind of are obligated to open their mouths and criticize them if need be, regarding the idea, the subject matter that's being said, and if it's wrong, they could lay it into him. You're saying stupidity. And actually, it's interesting because I was going to ask anyone here if you have contact with Rabbi Davis. He told me such a story. Rabbi Davis is now the Rav of Beis Tefillah. I need to know who what?
David,
thank you. Rabbi David. I need to know who this happened with. Basically, this is what he told me at Rabbi, the Rav that sits in your shul, Eish Kodesh, Rabbi Moshe, former Rav of Toronto. What's his last name?
Stern.
Rabbi Moshe Stern. So Rabbi Moshe Stern invited me to his house, and Rabbi David was there 4 years ago or so. It was wonderful, wonderful Friday night. And I didn't know Rabbi David was a Talmud Muvik of Rabbi Soloveitchik, and I had written about Rabbi Soloveitchik, but the book was republished, and so he was very interested in hearing what I wrote about, and I was interested in hearing from him. And I didn't know him, and he's a big Talmud Chacham. But he told me a story that stayed with me. I think I told you this once, but I really want to know who it happened with. So if anyone can get me the name, because I'm finishing something now, it's in my next book, and I'd like to consider putting in the name. Anyway, the story is that this little man from the Bronx, who he knew, calls him up one day and says, he was a teenager, 18, 19, 20, says, could you give me a ride to Rabbi Soloveitchik's shir? Rabbi Soloveitchik gave twice a year what was called a yahrzeit shir at Lampert Auditorium at Yeshiva University, with 2,000 people in attendance, standing room only. And this man, I would like to go. And he was an older man. He said, sure, I'll take you. So he says, come, and he tells him to come like 2 hours before the shiur to the Bronx, where he lived, and bring him to Washington Heights, where Yeshiva University is. Anyway, the kid said he brings him. He goes all the way down, it's an auditorium, go all the way down, and he parks himself the front row, right in front of where Rabbi Soloveitchik is going to give his lecture. And of course, Rabbi David is next to him because he's his driver. You're sitting next to me, Rabbi Soloveitchik starts speaking, and the way it worked is, I think the first 2 hours, he spoke Gemara and Halacha. And the next 2 hours, he spoke Drush and Agoda on the same idea, but he moved from Halacha and Agoda, to, from Halacha, Gemara and Halacha, to the Drush, the sermon part of it, the homiletic part of it, and what we can walk away with. And then it was an experience that everyone knew, and people came from Boston, from all over. This was twice a year. I mean, I look back, I could have been there and I wasn't. It's, you become smarter as you get older. Anyway, so in middle of Rabbi Soloveitchik's drasha, this old man stands up, this little man stands up, he's 5 feet or so, and he starts saying, in Yiddish, Harav Soloveitchik, was ihr gesagt jetzt is Stusim. What you said now is stupidity. In front of 2,000 people. And he starts arguing with them. And Soloveitchik knew him, and he kept his calm, kept his cool, and he said, I hear, bald, we'll soon get to it. And he's like all over the place. Some time goes by, he gets up again. Rav Soloveitchik, what you said, and at that time, Rabbi David saw that this man is a genius. He's like, Shas. He's this little man. He knows. Rav Soloveitchik again says, come. The rest of the story is not relevant right now. The rest of the story is that he walked out. He stomped out of frustration, and he took David with him. Rabbi David told me he was embarrassed. He turned colors in front of, this little man is schlepping him out in the middle of the lecture, because Rabbi Soloveitchik is not addressing his point. And then when he got upstairs, he's about to go out, he saw a guy and a girl, and the guy was telling the girl that, did you hear what JB said? He called Rabbi Soloveitchik by the slang JB, right? The little man turned around and gave him a slap in the face. And he said, you just embarrassed the Talmud Chacham. He grabbed him by the hand, he walked back down, all the way down, and he stopped, I think, the lecture, and he told him, now ask Mechila forgiveness from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik said later, it's all right. I'm getting to the point of the Rischa Deraisa, this agitation within learning. So in the Litvish Yeshiva world, at least in some of there was this attitude. There is even a clip, you might want to look it up on YouTube, where the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Shmuel Berenbaum, a great Talmud Chacham, a great Yid of the Bir Yeshiva, he's passed on, he's sitting with Rabbi Bakst, Bakst, who was another Mir Talmud Shiva, at a wedding. You got to see it. And they're going at each other. They are going at, it's like in the middle of a wedding, sitting at a table, during the meal, and they're talking Gemara, and one says, you don't know what you're talking about. It's so real. So you see, why do I say this? Because the Rebbe says here, for a student, in his opinion, this is not helpful in the long term. But I guess they would disagree, because in this system of learning, or maybe it's not disagree, they're talking about a context. It's a context that you and I, the Litvish Yeshiva pupil atmosphere is already known to be this style. If you don't want it or you don't like it, don't come here. Don't enter this space. So I'm just pointing this out. Yes, Yaakov. Yes.
In Chavetz Chaim, we had a similar paradigm that there were vadim that the Bachar would give either in Gemara or in the Rosh Hashiva Shmuz, and it wasn't that you ripped them apart. It was dafka to get more of the essence of what was trying to be said. That are you really saying it in the most concise, cogent, precise way, and that we all have our own ways of thinking, and it was to try and help him through his thought process. Are you really saying this the best way? And
right.
I guess I'm sure sometimes words were thrown around, but it was really with a toelis to help get to the final product.
Right. I understand. And I had in Lubavitch, in Chabad, teachers who wanted to accomplish the same thing, but they did not use the rhetoric, although they did point out and it was at the middle of a shiur, are you really thinking this through, Again, there's certain systems that believe it's more helpful to do that, and I think there are other systems that believe it's not. Let me just finish the next paragraph, and then we'll finish. Tayeles HaChinuch v'Hadracha, the benefit of education and guidance, or amitis, the true one is hurak b'shmiras kol atnoyim amurim. It's only if you follow all the previous set conditions and prerequisites, uvmiluan behidur, and fulfilling them in the most beautiful way, in a detailed way. V'oz yeh, top of 39, tvar achinuch v'adracha, then the education and the guidance will be b'kiyum nitzchi, everlasting, uverochos malifos, and there'll be manifold blessings that will be bestowed upon the educator and the guide. We'll stop here. Moshe, you wanted to say anything? Anyone want to say anything, Bekitzer? Because I think it's pretty clear. What?
I just want to say that, what we were learning a few minutes ago about what we've been learning about.
Yes.
Is something it's unfortunately very real. It's unfortunately very real, and we see that. I know with my own children, one in particular, who we only found out later that in Keaton first grade that the Rebbe was shoving him into a corner, and then it happened again. That a Rebbe in third grade was being abusive, but that time, when he was in first grade, we didn't know what was happening at the time, and we were so inexperienced as parents anyway, we didn't know exactly really what to do. But at the time it was third grade, and it was happening with a different Rebbe, then we took action, and actually we got him switched out in the middle of the year to a different Rebbe, to a different Rebbe, and then the following year the school let him go, let that Rebbe go,
right?
Because he was physically.
Yeah, I have it now. I have it. One of my children with their child's education, they're having a similar issue, and they're maybe in first grade. Today always, but we have to really be on top of these things from the earliest of age. Because they ruin children for the rest of their life, and it's so not right. It really is, in a way, abuse, meaning to say it's not, sexual abuse or maybe physical abuse, but, when they shove him and they pull him by the collar, it is, but, and we shouldn't tolerate it. It doesn't work, maybe it worked in Europe. First of all, I don't think it did. They could say whatever they want. I don't think it did, okay? It created madmen and bad situations. Okay, they could say whatever it is, and I'm sorry, it's not chinuch. But especially, later on, the children, the young adults, the teenagers walk around with anger and issues, and this is not a simple thing. This is, and if you don't have a system cooperating with you, go elsewhere. Go elsewhere. There's so much available today, and you could find the right setting. At the end of the day, everything's min hashamayim and Eibishter siyata d'shmaya, no question about it. But a person has an obligation to do their ishtadlus and deal with the situation. Chevre, We should have all a good day. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Zai Gazoo. Bye-bye.
Go ahead.
Take care.
Zai Gazoo.
Bye-bye.